In our October issue of Specialty Crop Grower magazine, we wrote a story about the blueberry market and how it's evolved over the last probably 5 to 10, 15 years is in becoming a more global market. And we wanted to have a grower on, Southeastern grower, to come on and kind of comment on this. So we thought it'd be great to have Michael Hill because he's a grower and a packer. Tell us, Michael, before we jump in, welcome first of all, but tell us a little bit about yourself and your farm and your other businesses.
Sure. Yeah. No, thanks, Frank, for having me on. Obviously, I've been in the blueberry industry for 15 years now. I really have been doing it ever since I graduated college. So it's been all I've known as my career. Um, I'm a fourth generation farmer from Florida, grew up around the vegetable industry, and like I said, been doing blueberries since 2010. Um, my family has a farming operation, which is Southern Hill Farms, where we do commercial farming as well as agritourism. And then what I'm in charge of running day to day. I'm the CEO of H&A Farms, where we farm commercial blueberries and strawberries, and we also have a packing house where we pack about 40% of the state of Florida's crop, and in charge of distribution, sales, logistics, all that. And then we also handle volume out of Georgia as well. So invested a lot into, I'm heavily invested into this industry. Spend a lot of time out in the field, but also traveling the world, trying to understand the future, the challenges, the pros, the cons. So I kind of have put myself in part of every little bit of the industry because it's important. And I feel like my job, to especially to our growers, is to educate them onto what is coming, whether that be good or bad.
Well, very good. And that's kind of why we wanted to have you on because you kind of do have, hand fingerprints in a little bit of all these different areas. So, talk a little bit about, some of the challenges that the blueberry industry, particularly in Florida and Southeast, are facing right now. And then maybe beyond that, we'll talk a little bit more about, fixes or potential fixes for that.
Yeah. So, first of all, there's a lot of challenges in every ag industry these days. Always has been, just always seems to be worse, you know. I don't think that's really the case. I think if you were to talk to our forefathers 70 years ago, they would say that these are the worst challenges they've ever seen, you know. So I think this is just part of agriculture. But I like to, break up Florida, especially in blueberries, into three regions. Basically, south of I-4, or just a little bit further south of I-4 is the southern region, and then you have Central Florida, which is north of I-4 and south of I'd say Umatilla, Ocala National Forest. North of I-4, south of that, and then North Florida, which is really the Gainesville area, Ocala North. And they all and very different. So the southern region, where it's been mostly citrus, has been replanted into blueberries. Haven't really been able to get with the previous varieties that we've really planted in the last 5 to 15 years. Haven't been able to get good chill requirements to make yields. So there's been a big shift in the last 7, 8 years to growing evergreen varieties. But to be honest with you, the evergreen varieties that we were releasing 7, 8 years ago that were mostly planted, don't really yield great. So that's really been the biggest challenge there, is having to replant, anywhere from 5 to 10 years ago, and then to come find out that the evergreen varieties haven't really yielded that well. The newer varieties that are evergreen now are yielding very good. But growers are facing the now third planting, in the last 15 years, which is tough on CapEx and cash flow. Central Florida has been able to get enough chill to grow the older varieties, but you can also grow evergreen in Central Florida. We have fields that we're growing in the same block, same plant date, evergreen and deciduous plantings, and they're both successful. But it's also early enough and further enough south that during those cold fronts in the wintertime, we have enough thermal protection from the Gulf that we're able to come in a good bit earlier than Georgia. And then you have North Florida, which is the Gainesville area, and they are able to get very good yields because of the amount of chill required, but they're only about 7 days before Georgia comes on. So really not able to receive the good high pricing that, really sets the early season apart from the late season. Now, going back to South Florida, the thing they have going for them is good pricing, but you just got to have the yield. So anyways, those are some challenges. Obviously, labor, especially with evergreen varieties, they don't machine harvest as well. It's a much more spread out harvest. Labor costs have continuously to increase, and also on an evergreen crop, you don't typically get as many pounds per harvest on a hand pick because it's more spread out and not as condensed. So labor's the biggest challenge. We've seen labor costs go from 95 cents a pound to $1.50, $1.60 with H2A. This new adverse effective wage rate, that is being passed right now will help with that. But still, if you look at the competition from other countries, it's substantially higher.
And you mentioned competition. There's more and more global production coming online, so that window to hit it is getting smaller. Correct?
Yes. Obviously, Mexico. When I got in this business 15 years ago, Mexico was producing less than 1 million pounds a year. Okay. Right now, they're producing around 150, 160 million pounds. So obviously massive growth. But I will say in the last 3 to 4 years, Mexico has been going up and down. Their production has kind of stalled. They're not really doing a lot of planting of blueberries right now. So, and not all of that fruit comes on in March and April. I would say probably 70% of that fruit comes on in March and April. They harvest from October all the way until June, with their peak being in March. They're having challenges in Mexico. They're having chili thrift pressure, which is a pest it's probably our biggest pest in Florida. They've really just started experiencing it. They're having labor issues, and also the exchange rate has not been great for them, and so it's really slowed down a lot of infrastructure planting. So I haven't seen their production ramp the way it was. If you look at 2015 to 2020, they were growing 30% year over year. Now I've actually seen some years where they dip down in production from the previous year, and then they go back up. They're kind of staying stagnant. Where you're really seeing the big growth in is Peru, right? They're producing, like I said, Mexico's produced 150, 160 million pounds, producing around 600 million pounds. Again, in 2015, when I got in this industry, Peru was producing nothing. Now they're at 600 million. They're the largest producer. The U.S. is producing, somewhere around the same, 550 million pounds or so fresh. But not all of that Peruvian production is coming to the U.S. I'd say about 60% of it is. The rest of it's going to Europe, China, other regions of the globe. But their time frame is mostly that September, October, November window, which is really hurting, the northern United States growers, the Michigan, Oregon, Washington growers, their late season. But then the region that's really that's come up and coming is Morocco, and they've increased a lot in growth, and they have the spring market time frame. So, we've seen, good stable pricing the last 3 years in Florida, because demand has continued to increase at the retail level. and Florida hasn't really produced more. Mexico's not really producing more. So if you look at the volume by week within the market, it's kind of staying still right now. And that's actually, I've seen increase in pricing. Last year we saw an increase in price, and but Morocco is seeing that as well, and they've gone from 8 years ago having around around 3,000 hectares to now they're up to around 14,000 hectares. Again, a lot of that is not going to be for the U.S. market. That will be the Mexico for Europe, because it's close to Europe. They're the low cost producer, so a lot of that volume is going to hurt Spain and other countries that have higher labor costs and higher production costs. But with this, some of that fruit's going to come over to the U.S., especially Canada, which Canada is not really considered. It's not considered the U.S. market. I mean, U.S. It's not within the U.S., but it consumes a lot of U.S. product. Canada and Morocco have very viable shipping lanes and trade lanes, especially with a lot of the citrus they grow in Morocco. And I think a lot of that U.S. production that's been going to Canada will first be chomped into by Morocco.
It was a very dynamic market and ever changing. Going forward, let's talk a little bit about opportunities or perhaps even fixes to some of the challenges that you currently face.
Yeah, so I would say the biggest change within the market in the last 5 years, the most substantial change is the retail quality expectations. The fruit that Peru is producing is a very high quality piece of fruit, and they've gone from 0 pounds and 15 years ago to 600 million now. So they're producing a lot of fruit that the consumer is eating a lot. The retail QC teams, the retail buyers are seeing, and they've really raised the standards of what is acceptable. What we used to be able to ship and sell 5 years ago is nowhere near what we do now, especially when we are the first domestic producer, and then we come out of an import season and they're used to seeing very, very firm fruit. Now, the Peruvian fruit is not as sweet. The Brix levels are not there. The fruit's not as sweet as ours, but it is firmer. It's bigger. It's crunchier. And that is what the retail buyers are saying their consumers want more than anything. They buy with their eyes, and it looks good in a clamshell. So when you go from them seeing that for 7 months to all of a sudden our fruit, which is a little bit softer, it tastes better, but it doesn't look as pretty in a clamshell. The historical varieties that we're growing, it's been a challenge for quality. So that's really been the biggest change, is we have to have good quality. And the new varieties that we're releasing right now with the UF, with IFAS and the breeding program at University of Florida, which the breeding program at UF is a top 3 in the world, are stepping up to those standards, right? And we're also focusing on machine harvestability, right? And we're able to achieve that now, but it takes that cost of replanting, But yeah, so you talk about opportunities, right? I'm at these retail meetings with these buyers. They want domestic fruit. Okay. They're saying that's in the top 3 things that they want. They gotta have firmness. They gotta have crunch. They gotta have size, and they gotta have, and then if they can't have, obviously they want sweetness and they want other things, but top 3 that the consumer wants is domestic. So they want it, right? But it's got to be good quality too at the same time. And with these new varieties, we are achieving those things. And then also going back, Mexico is not planting as much anymore. We're able to machine harvest now. It's taking our cost of harvest from $1.40, $1.50 to down to 15 to 40 cents, depending on your acres and if you own a machine or not. So we're cutting our costs down by 80% on harvesting. And actually, at our machine harvesting costs are cheaper than Mexico's or Peru's or Chile's, any of these regions hand harvesting costs. And then we don't have the shipping costs, right? And now we just have to have the yield. So I see the opportunity in these new varieties that we're growing with machine harvestability, with some of this new technology we're doing in the packing house with sorting and sizing and things like that. I see a lot of opportunity, especially with the growth and consumption within the product. It's the fastest growing fruit product at the retail produce aisle still, right? And you know, the problem has been in the past is just out producing it, out supplying it, and then with costs rising. But I see opportunity.
Excellent. Well, that's the good news to end on. Michael, I appreciate you joining us. Some great insights here, and we'll catch up again with you soon.
Yep. Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it.